22, and we're going to try something new today called sound. Apologize yesterday. Apparently there was an update and the software did not find my microphone. Went through the entire Bible study for you this morning, or yesterday morning, and recorded it all without a microphone. Sorry about that. So, what we're going to attempt today, I ended up doing a live version for the Kingdom First crew. So I'm not going to do another full session of yesterday's, but I do want to go back and recap and a little bit of review for the Kingdom First gang. That'll be healthy as well. So let's turn the page back to yesterday and introduce what we're talking about this week. We're talking about the upside. The upside of being set aside, being different from the world. And that's our theme for the entire week. And yesterday, we jumped right in with being disliked, being hated, being on the wrong side of things because we've been set apart. We are no longer part of the dark. We are in the light. We are choosing to live in the light. We are choosing to be the light into the darkness. And that makes us unpopular sometimes. And that's difficult, but that was the message that Jesus was sharing right before he was arrested with his disciples in John 15. If the world hates you, remember that it hated me first. The world would love you as one of its own if you belong to it. But you are no longer part of the world. I chose you to come out of the world, so it hates you. Very matter of fact, very straightforward, difficult to hear, certainly for the disciples, difficult for us to hear because we desire to get along. We desire to be well-liked, well-received, and that's not always going to happen. So that's what we talked about yesterday. Of course, continuing here in 20, do you remember what I told you? A slave is not greater than the master. Since they persecuted me, naturally they will persecute you. If they had listened to me, they would listen to you. So we touched on a little bit yesterday on this idea, the same idea that we were speaking of when we spoke of Moses and his extraordinary journey in just his first year of life, and how there were people along the way that made sure that Moses survived. First, just acts of kindness, then acts of love and sacrifice, all intended so that Moses could not only be set aside, but could fulfill his purpose, that his story would be written, just as your story is being written. So all of these things. Now, what's the upside? The upside that we discussed yesterday with the Kingdom First team is that we know we're on the right path when we're meeting resistance. If we're not meeting any resistance, the chances are we are not on the right path. If the world loves us, then there's something wrong. So how do we know that we are in pursuit of God and we are being transformed? It's not so comfortable. So there's an upside to being disliked. There's an upside of rubbing people wrong in the world. Now, you can't just be annoying. You actually have to be representing Christ. And if you're representing Christ and they hate you for representing Christ, then you're on the right path. All right, moving ahead, back past Tuesday the 10th, back through Upside, the celebrating being different, and kind of the theme of Sunday, of being set apart. As we spoke on Sunday, not only is Moses being set apart, but each one of you have been set apart as well. God has a plan. God has a story that he desires to tell through your life. We spoke yesterday that we are running in parallel to Moses' story, moving forward to the New Testament to another story, and oftentimes one that we frame in tragedy. The story of Stephen. Stephen is known as the first martyr. We barely get to know Stephen before he is taken from us in an act of violence. If we're not careful, our minds just dwell on, wow, he was taken out early. But what we are focusing on today is that Stephen was set apart from the very beginning, just as Moses, for a very specific task. And once that task is completed, he goes home. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's start with Stephen's story here in Acts 6, verse 3. And so brothers selected 7 men who are well respected and are full of the Spirit and wisdom. We will give them responsibilities, then we apostles can spend our time in prayer and teaching the world. Now, I explained this to the folks at the Genesis Bible small group yesterday. But Stephen is the answer to an issue that was going on within the early church. And it's the same struggle that we have at Connections. And oftentimes I speak of it when I'm speaking of adding breadth. There is only so much that a pastor can do, even though there are many, many jobs for the church to accomplish. So here in the early church, the apostles were called to seek God. Seek God for his wisdom, seek God, seek God for the vision for the church. And they found themselves struggling to take care of all the other things, especially when it came to the Greek widows. The Greek widows felt that they were not getting the same care as the Jewish widows, that they were being left out. And the apostles wanted to respond to that need, but they did not have the resource. So they found the resource. God provided the resource in the form of deacons, in the form of 7 men being set aside to be that hands and feet component that we, the church, are always looking for. Not only does the church body need care and tending to, but also those that are just coming into relationship with the church, and even those that have not decided whether they want to be in relationship with the church, all have needs to be tended to. I cannot tend to all of those needs because my job, similar to the apostles, is to remain centered in my relationship with God and seek him for the vision that he has for Connections Church. I enjoy being hands and feet. I spent many years in that role, and it has been difficult for me to make the transition over the years, knowing there is so much need. But just as the apostles were wrestling with this same issue, that's why you are being called to be the hands and feet, to be the deacons of Connections Church, just as Stephen was. In 3, everyone liked this idea, and they chose the following. Stephen's the head of the class. Stephen, a man full of faith and the Holy Spirit. No matter what the world says, no matter how much resistance we face, the upside of living a life that honors God is others recognize it. Yes, the world recognizes it, and many may respond in grumbling and complaining. But there will be those in the world that recognize it as authentic and integrity, and that's often what draws people in. Nevertheless, that was how Stephen was known. outside the church and within the church, Stephen was a man full of faith and the Holy Spirit. Then we go on to his fellow deacons, Philip, Prochorus, Nicanor, Timon, Parmenas, Nicholas of Antioch, an earlier convert to the Jewish faith. These 7 were presented to the apostles who prayed for them as they laid their hands on them. I'm looking forward to the day, and I believe the day is quickly arriving, where we will have our deacons reestablished to be the hands and the feet, serving the church and serving those that God desires to reach through his church. We've reached the end. So, to recap, since we had a hiatus yesterday of no sound, we can read these stories. We can read Moses' account. We can read the events in Exodus. We can read the events in Acts, and oftentimes be overwhelmed by how much resistance they face, how much grumbling and complaining they face. But what we want to be looking for, not only in Moses and Stephen's story this week, we want to be looking for it in our own story. What is God accomplishing? What are the upsides of this resistance, of this difficult path that we are called to walk? Not looking at all the consequences and the struggle. What is God accomplishing? And what are the upsides of choosing the better path? All right, I think we are caught up for the week, or caught up for the last 2 days. I do apologize again for technical difficulties. They happen from time to time. Know that I love you and I miss you, and I'll see you back here tomorrow morning, that being Wednesday, and we'll do it all over again with sound. I love you, I miss you, see ya. Please, in the interim, be good.